So today we'll be solving May June 2024 paper 2-1, and this is a fairly easy question, the 15-mark question. So we'll be looking at it. As always, first we'll plan the program that we'll be writing, plan the whole solution and visualize and then write the code. All right. So we have a 1D array called clubs that is used to store the names of 12 cricket clubs. And then there's a 2D array called statistics that is used to store for each cricket club the number of matches won, drawn, and lost. So won, drawn, and lost. Then we have the 1D array points that will store the number of points for each cricket club overall. And then the same thing as happens in all of the papers, that each index of your 2D array would map to the index of a 1D array. So index 2 of statistics means index 2 of points. Then we have another variable that is the matches variable which will store the total number of matches played by each team. And then each team will play the same number of matches. And then points are rewarded for a win that is 12, a draw that is 5, and a loss that is 0. Okay, once we're done with this, then we need to start writing the program. Okay, now the requirements of the program are that we allow the number of matches played to be input and stored with the maximum of 22 matches. Validate the number of matches played. Okay, that means that you must ensure that the matches are always up to 22. Okay, so max matches should be only 22. So we should loop through this. Then allow the name of cricket clubs to be input and stored. So the names. Then the number of matches won, drawn, and lost to be input. So the number of each stat. And then again validate. So validate the number of input matches won, lost, drawn against the total number of matches played. So there has to be some sort of condition that the matches won, drawn, plus lost must always be less than or equal to 22. Or in our case, it would be stored in the matches variable. This is a variable that is storing the total number of matches that the user will decide. It could be either 12, it could be 6, it could be 10, it could be 22, but it could not be 23 or any value less than 1. Then calculate and stores the total number of points for each club. Finds the cricket club or the clubs. Okay, this is very important. This is the part that the students oversaw in the exam. The question says that it should be a cricket club or clubs. This is absolutely very important. I'm highlighting this and I'm also underlining it. So clubs mean that there could be multiple clubs that could have the highest number of points, right? And then outputs the name of the winning club or the clubs, again the same implication, and then the number of wins and the total number of points that have been awarded to each team. So you're allowed to use pseudocode or program code, and you can add comments. In fact, you must add comments. You do not need to declare any array of variables. You may assume that it's already done. So anything that we make, you do not need to declare, and then there must be suitable messages. Okay, so in the first part that we do, we will now try to plan and then we'll try to visualize the problem. So for that, I'll head over to this visualization that I've made already. So here we have some cricket clubs named after football clubs for ease. And then here we have the statistics array, and then here we have the points array. Okay, so how do we map these things now? The question says there is a statistics array, and then each team plays the same number of matches and the points are awarded, like win, draw, and loss. And these are the values that the user is supposed to input. So this gives you the major indication that this 2D array is supposed to have 3 columns. Okay, one for the number of matches they won, for drawn, and for lost. And then the reason I'm using 12 is it's just an arbitrary number. This should be in fact replaced by matches. This is the number of matches that each team would have. This should remain 12 because in the question they've said there are 12 teams. Okay, and then based on the number of matches, we will validate that the user should have played, or each team, the user inputs should have played up to the number of matches that we've decided. Okay, so let's say if you're saying that the total is going to be, let's say, 5 matches, so this is clearly wrong because here the total adds up to 6 matches, 3 wins, 1 draw, and 2 losses. So this is wrong. We won't allow these values. All right. Okay, so this is the 2D array part. Then for the 1D array part, we also have the points array. We have the points array here. Here we have all the values from 1 to 12. Here we have all the values from 1 to 12 for each team. So as the question said, that each index of the statistics array will be referring to the same index in the points array. So that means when we are looking at the points array here, this is referring to, so if we have, let's say, Man City, index 4, this refers to the total number of matches they won, drawn, and lost in statistics at row 4. And that index score of points array, this also tells us the total number of points that Ben City has. So this is pretty straightforward. Then the only part left is that we have to calculate which team has the highest number of points, and there could be multiple teams. So for that, we will need to find the maximum values. And you can clearly see that this team number 4, and team number 12, they all have same number of points, which means that Richmond, Man City, and then we'll have Madrid, these three would be combined winners of the league. Okay, and then we'll need to output that accordingly. As the question has said, that you need to point out the name of the winning club or clubs, the number of wins, and the total number of points awarded. So in each case, the number of wins would be 5 and 5 and 1, and then the total points would be 40, 40, 40, like that. So now we've understood the question properly. We can start writing the code. Okay, so this visualizations, should be very, very helpful overall for us to actually write the code. We can clearly see that here we have a 2D array, and we do not need to iterate the whole 2D array as we do for each row or for each column, because we know the number of columns and we know what will be saved in each of them. So the first one will save the wins, the second will save draws, and the third one will save losses. So we can just refer to this 2D array with, let's say, row 1 and column 1, then row 1 and column 2, and then row 1 and column 3. And we can save the values one by one like this, and all the way till 12. All right, so let's start the code. All right, so first of all, we need to ask the user to input some set of number of matches that they've played. As we were told in the question, this variable matches that stores each team plays the same number of matches. So we need to validate the number of matches played. Okay, allow the number of matches played to be stored in input. So first of all, we'll do that. We'll ask the user output. Again, the question says no declaration, so we don't need to declare anything. Enter number of matches, and you take input in matches. Please be very careful that M is uppercase, so it has to be left uppercase in the code as well. Then we need to validate, so you can either use repeat until here or you can use while here. I'll just use while. So while matches are less than 0, matches are less than 0, or matches are greater than 22. Again, why 22? Because the question has told us that the maximum of 22 matches are allowed, not more than 22. And while, and I'll say output max matches allowed are 22. So I need to take input into the matches again. So until and unless user inputs a value that is valid between 1 to 22, this will keep on repeat. Okay, and we can keep adding comments as well, validating the input for total number of matches. And please make sure you are adding line comments, not writing comments at the end in paragraph form. Okay, then the question says that we need to allow the name of the cricket clubs to be input and stored. And for the name of the cricket clubs, the array is called clubs. So we need to iterate through the whole array, and then we need to input values one by one. So we have a total of 12 values, and we need to loop through them. So we'll run a loop. So here we are storing club names in clubs array. So here we will run a for loop for I1 to 12. Output enter club name. I'll input that into clubs index I, and then I do next time. So what this will do is that I would be replaced by 1 first. So we're saying input some name in the first index of the array. This would be empty, obviously. So here, let's say we input Barca. So that would be the first one. Then the loop goes to next I becomes 2. I becomes 2. So then we input a second, and then third, then fourth, and fifth, and so on and so forth. So this is how it goes. All right. So till this point, we are done with the first two parts, 1, 2. In fact, we're done with the names as well. Now we need to allow the number of matches won, drawn, and lost to be stored. And we also need to validate them that they are always equal to the number of matches that the user has played. All right. So in fact, this should not be less than, it should be always equal. If the total number of matches were supposed to be 10, then the win and drawn and lost should be equal to 10. All right. So now in this case, we need to actually go through our array, because we need to save these statistics as well. Again, the array is filled for dummy values just for the sake of planning this code. Otherwise, it would be empty. So we need to take values one by one. So in this case, we do not need a nested loop because we do not want to iterate through the whole array row and column wise. We can just go to each row, and because we know we need to save wins and draws and losses at 1, 2, and 3, so we can just use those values directly. Also, we could have done this in the same loop where we enter the points, but it's totally up to you. Okay, now we are going to store stats and calculate points. All right, how do we do that? So first of all, we are going to ask the user to input the total number of losses in match. And until and unless they do not equal to the number of matches, you are going to keep on repeating. So again, we need to iterate the array 12 times because there are 12 rows. And for each row, we have to check for wins, draws, and losses, these three values. So for, let's say, row 1 to 12 output, in fact, so as I said, you could have done this in the single loop as well. Okay, so this was just for demonstration, so you can just do it in one place. And we can here say store stats and club names and calculate points. Okay, so here we can replace it with I. All right, so now we also need to initialize the counters. We cannot directly write while, let's say, 1 plus draw plus loss is not equal to matches. Okay, so the first issue would be that what are the values of these? So we need to initialize them. And for initialization, we can simply set them to 0. Please do not make this assumption that 0 would automatically be assumed. You always have to explicitly state that in the program. So here we can say initializing counters. So here we have 1 set to 0. In fact, we can do it in one line. Draw and lost, they're all set to 0. Okay, so now this works fine. Now we are going to ask the user to input the values. So 0 plus 0 plus 0, since it doesn't add up to the number of matches, because it's not possible that user would have played 0 matches. In fact, it should be less than 1. So even if you enter 0, that should not be allowed. All right. So we write end while, and here we will now ask the user to output enter number of wins, draws, and losses, and then we'll input 1, draw, and lost. Again, you can do this with repeat until as well. It's totally up to your preference. Okay, they essentially are the same thing. They both type of conditional loops. Okay, so now we had zeros here because zeros would never add up to number of matches. So we'll run the loop again. Maybe next time we input. So let's say the matches were equal to 10, and this time the user inputs 3 won, 3 losses, and 4 lost. So now 10 would be equal to 10. So this loop would end now. Okay, so this will make sure that our validation works properly. All right, so this while loop works. Here we can add a comment validating number of, or you can validating stats. All right, then in the next part it says ask the user to re-enter the number of matches if they do not add up. So we have done that, and then you need to calculate and store the total number of points for each club. Okay, so the point calculation is directly linked here. They've already given us the rubric for finding the total score. So now we need to do that. First, we'll save the values. We need to save them because we just took input from the user, not saving them in the stats array. So here we will say statistics, and now statistics is a 2D array. Please keep that in mind. So we need to use 2 indices. The first one would be row. That is the value that getting from the for loop because there are 12 rows. So again, these are the 12 rows that we're looking at. And now at column 1, this is the column that will save the number of wins for each team. So I'll just save 1 here. Then statistics, row 2. And I'll just repeat that. So after having done this, whatever the user has inputted, and if those values equal to the number of matches, you would have saved those values. So let's say since we're assuming matches are equal to 10, so 3, 3, and 4. All right, then maybe 5 and 3 and 2. So this is how it will work now, and we have successfully saved them in our statistics array. Now the next part says that we also need to calculate the total number of points for each club. Okay, and if you look above, it says the 1D array is used to store the total number of points for each club. So we also need to make use of this array and save the points in the points array. So how do I calculate the points? Again, the instructions are given to us. This is the math 12, 5, and 0. So for each win, it's 12 points, draw is 5, and the loss is 0. So we can just calculate that. So we need to save them directly in the points array. So points array is also getting the same index as we are getting in the statistics array using the row loop variable row. So if the row is 1, we are looking at club 1, all of its stats, and then points index 1. If we're looking at club 5, then row number 5 of statistics, and then row number 5 of points. So we use the same index. So I'll say points index row, and here we need to multiply each of the values. So let's say if there are 5 wins, so we need to multiply 5 with 12, and then draws with 5, and then losses with 0. The number with their weight. So 1 into 12 plus draw into 5. And we don't need to multiply 0 with anything, so we can leave it. Or if you want to write it, you can still do that. Lost into 0, like this. Okay, so this would have saved the value in some index starting from 1. in the points array. All right, so far, once we run this code, this would have given us all the points for all the 12 teams, including all the statistics inputted and their weights applied and the final scores for each team. So we're done with the question pretty much. Now we're only left with two things to do. It says find the cricket club with the highest number of points. Again, we have to select multiple ones and then you output the name and also the number of wins. So we need to keep that in mind. Okay, so how do we find the maximum value? Again, the same method as we've done before. So if you start from the first index, we'll assume that this is the max. Then we'll compare it with the second value. 40 is greater than max, so max becomes 40. Then 18 is not greater than max. 40 is not greater than max. 40 is in fact equal to max. 22 is not equal to max. Ignoring all the values, and 40 is not equal to max, again is not greater than max. So max remains 40, and this is what we need to do. Anytime we look at a value that is larger than max, it becomes a max. Okay, and in the next part it says we also need to output the number of wins for each team. So the winning teams would be, in our case, they would be Madrid, and Madrid would have won 5 matches. So I'm just going to add some arbitrary numbers, okay, without calculating. So 6, 3, and 1. Maybe, and then okay, maybe we can, and here we can have 5 and 2 and 3, something like that. All right, so we'll be outputting Richmond with 12 wins, then we'll output Man City with 6 wins, and then we'll output Madrid with 5 wins, like this. This is going to be the final out. Okay, so how do we do this? Now we are going to calculate the largest number of points that any team has gotten. So finding club with highest points, or you can say finding the highest number of points. All right, so again, so we can say max points is currently equal to -1. Okay, we know for sure that all the points are always going to be more than 0 or at least 0. So then we can assume that we can start with the first assumption that the value would be -1. This is one option that you can use, or you can simply assume that the value at the first index of your points array would be your maximum value. This is a safer, you can say, assumption because it's much more universal and can be applied through all the questions. Then we are going to iterate through this loop and we are going to identify the values. If any value is larger than the current max, we reassign it. So for, let's say, j1 to 12, if and the current points, so we can save like this. We can save the current value that we're getting from the array in current, just so we don't have to repeat points over and over again. If current is larger than max points, if at any point you see a value that is greater than the current large, so you make it the maximum value. So you'll say max points becomes equal to current, and then you end it, and then you do next j, like this. All right, so after having executed this loop, we would have found the largest value. In our case, it would have been 40, right? So now we've just identified the largest number of points, and now we need to see which teams actually have 40 points if there are multiple winners of the league. Okay, so now we'll say outputting, you can say finding teams with highest points. So we'll repeat the same process, except this time we are just going to check any team that has equal number of points as the highest, and we need to save its index, which in our case it would be 2, it would be 4, and it would be 12, like this. All right, so we need to save them, and in order to save them, we simply can make one more array, and we can save them one by one, so that we can also tell about the total number of winning clubs at the end. So the question says outputs the name or the names of the winning clubs. Okay, so we need to save each index as well. So because we have multiple indices 2, 4, and 12, and there's only one way of saving them, that is using another array. Because if you save them in a variable, so 4 would overwrite 2, and then 12 would overwrite 4. So that wouldn't be, that would mess up the whole program. So we need another array. Why? Because let's call this array tie index. So there is a tie at index 2, and then index 4, and then index 12. So we need to save them individually in number of wins. So we can go to row 2 and we can output the number of wins there. Then we'll go to row 4 and we'll go to their number of wins, and then we'll go to 12 and we'll output their number of wins and their names as well. So that is the reason why we have to do this. All right, we need to save their indices individually, again because variable can only save one value at a time, so it will end up overwriting them. Okay, now we need to find the teams with the highest number of points. So again, we loop through the array for z1 to 12 if the points that we're looking at are equal to the max points. Okay, so this means that the array that we're looking at, so we start from the first one. Is it equal to 40? No. Is it equal to 40? The previous max? Yes. So we need to save its index, and we can just, substitute it with current points index C. So I'll save this in the array tie index, and I'll go to its index. Let's call it IDX, and I'll save the value of Z there, and I'll do end if, and I'll do next C. Okay, now why do we have this IDX here? The reason is that this index is not linked with the loop variable Z. Okay, so Z has to iterate through 12 values, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And meanwhile, your tie index will go in a different, go through a different number of indices. So we cannot use them for the same purpose. They are serving different purpose. So that's why we need an IDX or any other variable that will basically keep a track of the values in your tie index array. So they are two separate variables. So we need to set it as 1 first. Index is set to 1 like this. And then every time you save a value in the index, you need to increment it by 1. So once you have saved a value, you increment the value by 1 of IDX. Reason, let's say you found a value that is equal to 40. So now the IDX has to go to the second index in order to save a value next time. So next time you'll encounter 4, and then you'll move it to the third index, where eventually you'll put 12 like this. All right, same concept as we have been doing so far. And then in the last part, the question says you need to output the name and the number of wins. Okay, so outputting names and wins of winner clubs. So again, we run the loop for, let's say, I. We can repeat I 1 to 12. Output winning clubs, comma, clubs tie index I. Okay, so you can either write it this way. Okay, what does it mean? So this might be a little confusing, so I can just move it separately. I'll just call it index like this. Okay, so what is it doing? I'm saying now you have to output the number of winners, the name of the winners, and their win count. So tie index had saved the values of the winners that shared the same number of points. So we get the first value, that is 2. So I'm saying get this value. It got 2 and saved it in IND. So I'm simply saying here that output the name of the club 2, and the output would be Real Madrid. All right. So you can either write it directly like this, or you can, just put it in a separate variable and replace that variable with a new one. So this would give us the winning club one by one. And in order to output the win count, you can say total wins will, okay, how do we get wins? So wins are stored in the nth row. So the nth row will be getting from IND, because IND saves the index. So from the index, let's say the current was 2. So we need to look at the first row, right? Same for Man City. We need to look at the 4th row, first column. And then same for Richmond, we need to look at the 12th row, first column. So we just need to do that. We'll say statistics, row number IND, and column number 1. Again, why IND? Because IND is saved in a separate array called tie index, where we saved these indices separately of all the values for the clubs that are winning the league, because they shared the highest points. And we'll do next I. And anything else, output the name of the winning clubs and the number of wins and the total number of points. Okay, we also need to output the total number of points as well. So let's do that. In fact, because they are sharing the total number of points, so we don't need to output it multiple times. We can just output it once. Output total points, and we can just say the maximum number of points which we got from max points. All right, again, you can simply just output it here. You can say output total points, not points in IND. Okay, you can do that, but it essentially will keep outputting 43 times. So you don't want to do that, because it's obvious that all of them are sharing the same number of points. So you can just get rid of it, and you can just output the maximum points that any of these teams got. And with this, the question is done.